This excerpt details the developing conflict between former President Donald Trump and John Deere, stemming from the company's decision to move some production from Iowa to Mexico. Here's a breakdown. Trump's threat. Trump is threatening to impose a 200% tariff on John Deere products sold in the U.S. if they proceed with moving production to Mexico. He sees this move as resulting in U.S. layoffs. John Deere's actions. John Deere is shifting manufacturing of farm equipment to Mexico, resulting in hundreds of U.S. layoffs. The broader impact. The situation is described as more than just a company's decision. It's part of a larger shift impacting American manufacturing and the national debate. Financial consequences. Early 2025 policy decisions, likely referring to tariff increases, are already impacting John Deere's finances significantly. The company is facing a near $500 million hit, with one quarter showing a $100 million loss. Stock prices are down nearly 30%, and there have already been over 200 layoffs. Wider industry impact. The issue extends beyond John Deere, with other manufacturers in the equipment sector also losing hundreds of millions due to these policies. John Deere itself projects potential losses reaching $600 million by the end of the year. In summary, the text describes a classic example of the potential fallout from tariffs and trade disputes. John Deere's decision to move production to Mexico is met with a threat of high tariffs from Trump, leading to financial difficulties for the company, job losses, and broader concerns about the future of American manufacturing. This passage describes a significant disruption in the agricultural machinery industry, likely triggered by an external event, possibly hinted at by the initial EUSA Psi CXG 4H2CCs O0KS Troskozai N0UC 931E, which could be an API key or a placeholder for a specific cause. Here's a breakdown of the key themes and points. Disruption and its impact. The passage highlights a disruption that ripples through the entire system, affecting supply lines, investment planning, and ultimately the core of the company's production model. The reliance on made-in-America production is questioned. The financial consequences. The immediate results are negative, with declining revenue and thinning profit margins. See, Reuters characterizes it as a severe shock. The passage stresses that this isn't just a bad quarter, but a turning point. Strategic reevaluation. The disruption forces the company to reconsider its manufacturing strategy. The central question is where to find a reliable foothold if domestic manufacturing is no longer dependable. Impact on rural communities. The consequences extend beyond corporate spreadsheets. The disruption affects farmers. They are hesitant to make major investments due to uncertainty and the fear of financial losses. Bankers, they are concerned about falling equipment values and market volatility, drawing regulatory scrutiny. Local economies. A general atmosphere of hesitation and uncertainty spreads, reminiscent of past agricultural downturns. Secondary effects. The passage describes a second wave of disruption that's not easily quantifiable. Delayed machinery replacement. Farmers postpone buying new equipment. Widespread cancellations. Dealers in the US and Canada report cancellations of orders. In essence, the passage paints a picture of an industry facing a profound crisis. The initial shock forces a re-evaluation of fundamental assumptions about manufacturing, and its impact extends far beyond the company's bottom line, deeply impacting rural communities and the agricultural economy. This passage describes a significant slowdown and period of uncertainty in the agricultural equipment market, primarily in 2025, driven by national policy instability and new tariffs. Here's a breakdown of the key points. Market stagnation. The market experienced a sharp drop in demand, likened to a freeze, reminiscent of past agricultural slumps. Order books were unusually silent. Equipment usage. Farmers kept older equipment longer, delaying upgrades due to uncertainty. Manufacturing impact. Manufacturers like Case IH reduced staff in states like North Dakota and Minnesota due to decreased demand. Tariff pressure. New tariffs increased the cost of imported components, forcing manufacturers to consider price increases of 2 to 4%, further discouraging purchases. Add uncertainty and hesitation. Uncertainty became the defining characteristic of the market, causing farmers to hesitate, dealers to pause purchases, and manufacturers to reduce production. Source of instability. The primary driver was the unpredictability of national policy, particularly tariff announcements, which lacked consistent timelines and were often communicated through informal channels. Planning difficulties. The unpredictable policy environment made long-term planning impossible for manufacturers as they couldn't anticipate future regulations. Specific example: a proposal to impose a 200% tariff on tractors if John Deere shifted production from Iowa highlights the severity and potential impact of the policy instability. In essence, the passage depicts a market paralyzed by policy-driven uncertainty, leading to decreased demand, production cuts, and an overall sense of stagnation. This passage describes how uncertainty surrounding potential policy changes in the United States, specifically tariffs, led a company implied to be John Deere or a similar large manufacturer, referred to as Deere, to strategically shift its operations to Canada. Here's a breakdown of the key points. Uncertainty created by U.S. policy. The threat of tariffs, even without formal implementation, created significant uncertainty for businesses. This forced companies to revise production schedules, complicate procurement, and adjust workforce planning. Canada as a stable alternative. Canada, with its lower electricity rates and more stable environment, became an attractive alternative for companies seeking to mitigate the risks associated with U.S. policy volatility. Multi-anchor approach. The company adopted a strategy of diversification, viewing Canada as a multi-anchor to balance the instability in the U.S. Expanded Canadian operations. Evidence of this shift includes the expansion of Canadian facilities, such as the Langley site in British Columbia, becoming a center of excellence for forestry equipment. This site now serves global markets, reducing dependence on U.S. demand. Canada's strengths. The passage highlights Canada's stability, providing a buffer against unpredictable U.S. policies. Lower costs, lower electricity rates make production more cost-effective. Existing infrastructure. A large dealer network and existing employee base support expansion. Government support. Provincial governments encourage growth in relevant industries. Significant market. A major destination for U.S. agricultural equipment exports. Langley site. Example. The Langley facility is a concrete example of a Canadian site that has evolved to become a global supplier, demonstrating Canada's capacity to operate independently and competitively. In summary, the passage argues that the threat of protectionist policies in the U.S. spurred a strategic shift towards Canada, leveraging its stability, cost advantages, and existing infrastructure to create a more resilient and diversified business operation. This passage describes a shift in manufacturing strategy, specifically highlighting the growing importance of Canada as a stable and reliable location for production within North America. Here's a breakdown of the key points. Mutual dependence. The text emphasizes that the relationship between manufacturing companies, specifically mentioning Deere as an example, and Canada is one of mutual dependence, benefiting both sides. Canada as a central pillar. Canada is no longer just a backup plan for companies. It has become a key component in their long-term strategies due to its stable infrastructure, consistent policies, and trade advantages. Seeking stability. The shift towards Canada reflects a broader trend among global manufacturers looking for environments where they can plan long-term without constant disruptions. Bridge to the U.S. market. Canada is seen as a bridge to the American market, providing proximity while offering a more predictable policy environment. USMCA advantages. The USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, has strengthened Canada's position by allowing products manufactured there to benefit from North American tariff advantages. This provides access to customers without the policy risks associated with manufacturing in the United States. Multi-pillar manufacturing model. The passage introduces the idea of a multi-pillar manufacturing model where companies spread risk across multiple jurisdictions while still maintaining access to key markets. Long-term stability. In a world of rapidly changing economic and geopolitical conditions, this approach offers a practical way for companies to achieve long-term stability. Re-evaluating production networks. The text suggests that this shift is prompting industries to re-evaluate their traditional production networks and consider new strategies for the next decade. In essence, the passage argues that Canada's stability and favorable trade agreements are making it an increasingly attractive location for manufacturers seeking a reliable base in North America, leading to a more diversified and resilient global manufacturing landscape. This passage discusses the increasing importance of stability in the global manufacturing landscape and how recent trade tensions, particularly between the US and Mexico, are impacting investment decisions. Here's a breakdown of the key themes. Stability as a key resource. The passage emphasizes that stability in policy and infrastructure is now a critical factor for manufacturers when choosing investment locations. This stability is seen as being as important as traditional factors like labor, materials, and technology. Shift in economic power. The passage suggests that economic power may shift towards regions that can offer policy consistency and reliable infrastructure. This indicates that countries or regions with unpredictable trade policies or unreliable infrastructure may lose out on investment opportunities. US-Mexico trade tensions. The passage highlights the impact of tariff increases on Mexican exports to the US, specifically steel and aluminum. It mentions the ongoing negotiations between the presidents of Mexico and the US, but notes the uncertainty surrounding future trade rules. Impact on Nuevo León. The passage focuses on Nuevo León, Mexico, which had been positioning itself as a near-shoring capital, particularly with the planned Tesla Gigafactory. However, the uncertainty surrounding trade rules has led Tesla to put the project on hold, creating a sense of stalled momentum and disillusionment among smaller firms that had hoped to benefit from the region's investment boom. Uneven distribution of benefits. The passage notes that the rewards of industrial expansion have primarily benefited larger corporations, while smaller firms have been left behind in the recent shake-up. Government response. The passage mentions that officials in Nuevo León are trying to downplay the impact of the disruption and frame it as an opportunity to strengthen local supply chains. In essence, the passage paints a picture of a global manufacturing landscape where stability and predictability are becoming increasingly valuable and where trade tensions and policy uncertainty can have significant consequences for investment decisions and regional economies. This text discusses efforts in Mexico, particularly in the state of Nuevo León, to strengthen its domestic manufacturing base and integrate it into global supply chains. Here's a breakdown of the key points. Efforts to strengthen domestic production. Encouraging large industries to source materials locally, providing loans and tax incentives for smaller businesses to upgrade equipment and participate in global manufacturing networks. Programs like Made in Nuevo León support local entrepreneurship and encourage manufacturers to use regional suppliers. National efforts under Plan Mexico aim to increase domestic capacity and bolster Mexico's global competitiveness. Challenges to integration. Integrating small workshops into international supply chains is difficult due to volume, consistency, and delivery speed requirements that often don't align with the capabilities of small regional producers. Many small producers rely on employment from larger companies rather than direct participation in their supply networks. A disconnect exists because many products made in Mexico are priced for export and don't easily fit domestic market conditions. USMCA and trade concerns. The upcoming review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, creates uncertainty. Nuevo León officials are advocating for equal treatment of Mexican aluminum and steel under USMCA rules to avoid tariffs when exporting to the United States. This is seen as a way to protect against disruption and strengthen the region's competitiveness. Importance of the US-Mexico relationship. Mexico's economy is deeply intertwined with the US and relies heavily on international trade for growth. Encouraging companies that depend on foreign markets to develop stronger domestic customers is a significant challenge. In essence, the text highlights Mexico's push to strengthen its domestic manufacturing, address challenges related to integrating smaller businesses into global supply chains, and navigate the complexities of trade relations with the U.S., particularly in the context of the USMCA. This passage paints a picture of cautious optimism among small workshop owners amidst ongoing economic uncertainties. Here's a breakdown of the key themes. Slow recovery. There are signs of improvement, with machines starting to run again and production cycles potentially returning to normal. Cautious optimism. Business owners are welcoming the positive changes, but they remain guarded and skeptical. The importance of concrete orders. They emphasize that positive statements and reports are not enough. Real recovery, in their eyes, is defined by the arrival of confirmed purchase orders. Navigating uncertainty. The business environment is complex, influenced by policy changes, international pressures, and the need to balance global supply chains with local resilience. Skepticism and proof. Many small workshop owners will not fully believe in a recovery until they have tangible proof in the form of signed contracts in their hands. In essence, the passage highlights the precarious position of small businesses during economic fluctuations. They are hopeful for improvement but require tangible evidence before fully embracing the idea of a full recovery. They have been burned before, and words are cheap compared to the solid confirmation of a signed purchase order.